Animal Magnetism, exploring animal care for creatures great and small, conservation and preservation in today's world. Find out what a single voice can do to make a difference in the lives of animals. Animal Magnetism with Carolyn Hennessy starts right now on UBN Radio.
It's so not one voice, Tony. It's just not one voice. It's many, many, many voices. Can I redo my own promo? Can I redo? Yeah, because it ain't one voice. Not by a long shot. Welcome once again, animal preservationists and conservationists, animal lovers everywhere, to Animal Magnetism. I am your animal loving host, Carolyn Hennessy, here once again. Well, actually, not once again, because she's been gone for how many weeks have you been gone, Andrea?
Oh, just a few.
Just a few. Yeah, just a few. Well, that matters. Okay, that matters on this show. You've been hither and yon. You've been trekking and biking and hiking and walking and
working.
Yes, working. Okay, yes. Andrea Compton, my producer and co-host extraordinaire. Yeah.
Thank you.
And once
missed
again,
you and glad to be back.
I'm glad. Well, we are all glad you are back, and also joined by my Alpha and Omega, my animal mentor, my other co-host, who was a temporary co-host and now is basically permanent, Dr. Gray Stafford.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be with you, Andrea.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Hey, here's my question for you. Did you ever contact Dr. Nielsen? Did he contact you?
Dr. Neil, yes.
Really?
Well, we had our first exchange. We haven't followed up, so we got
follow up.
Because
that could bring you to Los Angeles, and then you could sit in on this show physically.
I'm not sure we'd get much done if we're both in the same location all the time.
Well, that's true. That's true. We would save a lot of animals, but everything else would suffer. And we have an amazing guest who I will introduce in just a moment. But first of all, we have two new sponsors. SeaWorld, and this is my fabulous SeaWorld rescue hat. SeaWorld is now sponsoring the show. Yay, SeaWorld. Just SeaWorld Rescue. I think 37, it might be 34, but I think it's 37,000 animals rescued. And the reason I think I know this is because that's the same number of years that SeaWorld has not taken anything out of the wild. So we love our SeaWorld. We love our SeaWorld and all they do for animals. My God, cetaceans, birds, you name it, they rescue it. And Nutrient Touch. This is basically a fabulous de-stressing bath for your dogs, cats, horses, you name it. And this is it's reducing joint pain, increasing mobility, and lowering stress. And it's I think there are like 2 or 3 baths for your dogs in this one little packet. And you can find it by Nutrient Touch Corporation. So look for nutrienttouch.com. And I've done it actually with Sophie Tucker. And the big thing it does is it reduces inflammation. They have one for humans too, but we don't care about that on this show.
That was my question.
Oh, yes, they do. They have one for humans. And I actually have some. So I may send it to you. Okay. Or give it to you when you get the job. Today we have got amazing woman, Dr. Cynthia Smith, who heads up the National Marine Mammal Foundation. Welcome to the show. Indeed. And we are here today to talk about, well, Gray, first of all, I listened to your podcast on this particular topic, and that is the disappearance, the possible extinction of the vaquita, which is a small, very shy, beautiful little porpoise that lives down in the Gulf of Mexico, in the northern section of the Gulf of Mexico.
In the Gulf of California.
Gulf of California.
Yes. Sea of Cortez.
Sea of Cortez. Yes. I'm all right. I just know that the Mexican government is involved some way, and I went there. Yes. So the Gulf of California. Thank you for that correction. And the fact that I think when we spoke about this subject a year ago, there were 30. Roughly 1958, they discovered this species, and there were about 600. They guesstimated there were about 600. Last year, there were 30. So 1958 to 2018, and we've seen an absolute decimation of the species. And now we believe that there are roughly 15. So it's been cut in half in 12 months. And if things go the way that they are continuing to go, we will see the extinction of the species in another 12 months. But Dr. Cynthia Smith, is working to prevent that with the National Marine Mammal Foundation. Dr. Smith, let's talk about, first of all, the National Marine Mammal Foundation. It's roughly about 10 years old, and you started small, but you're growing big.
Yeah, we are, exactly. We're 10 years old. We started with a staff of about 9, and now we're 150 strong. So we have veterinarians, scientists, educators, animal care experts. We have an amazing group of people, and we're headquartered here in San Diego, but we do also have an office now in Charleston, and that office is focused entirely on conservation medicine. So it's been a really amazing journey, and just an honor to be a part of the organization and to see it grow the way it has.
Was this organization founded specifically for the vaquita? I don't think it was. It was founded because there is so much that's happening in the Gulf of California, the Gulf of Mexico, everywhere. Everywhere there's water, there's decimation of species happening. So you lead this now. Were you a founder of this?
So Vaquita CPR is a consortium of 22 organizations across 9 countries. And Vaquita, we're a member of that organization, and we were asked by the Mexican government to help lead the consortium in a rescue effort that took place in 2017. So our organization was well suited just because we do all kinds of animal work with small cetaceans in particular, and our proximity to Mexico. Right. I mean, we are right here close to the border, and so it really kind of made sense that we would be the ones to help launch a rescue effort that's just about 3-4 hours from San Diego.
I'm fascinated that the Mexican government actually came in and asked you to help, because that's very hopeful, because they have not, even though there have been all these regulations, I believe, put in place, they have not been able to stop the illegal gillnet fishing.
Right. And, it's really interesting because the Mexican government actually has done quite a bit in terms of vaquita conservation. And many years ago, they created a committee of scientists to help guide and inform their conservation efforts. And where it really fell short of what they were trying to accomplish was just the execution of the plan. And so there was not good enforcement and execution of what they were trying to accomplish by protecting where these animals live in the Sea of Cortez and helping the fishermen develop other ways of making a living so that they didn't have to rely on fishing. And then you add on top now this new wildlife trafficking issue, which is just heartbreaking, and the species is declining even more rapidly, as you very well captured over the last couple of years.
All right, so let's talk about gillnet fishing.
Yeah.
Why it's so dangerous, and the fact that the vaquita is the word is bycatch. They are not the thing that is being fished or hunted. They are simply, as Gray said so eloquently in his podcast, innocent bystanders, and because they are so small, they are actually able to get into these nets. So we'll talk about what is a gillnet for my listeners who don't know.
Yeah, so a gillnet is one of the most common types of fishing nets that is used globally, and it unfortunately indiscriminately catches animals of all different sizes. And so, as you can see, sea turtles and fish and sharks and dolphins, even whales can get entangled in these nets. And the ones that need to breathe air drown rapidly, and then others that need water to be moving across their gills do also eventually drown. And so it's just a really unsustainable way of fishing, but we haven't provided these, especially these small fishing communities that live all across the world and really rely on that to feed their families and sustain themselves. Haven't, as a global community, offered them really meaningful alternatives. And so until we do that, it's going to continue to be a problem.
Is there a meaningful alternative to a gill net?
I think if we look at alternative fishing solutions, and it's really about fishing in a different way, there are things that have been developed, but the issue is that either they haven't been implemented into the regions that need them most, or they're just not as good at helping them obtain the fish that they're after. Right. And so I think a lot of people would answer that question a lot of different ways, but certainly in the Sea of Cortez, there are not alternative fishing solutions or alternative livelihoods for those communities. So that's a really important thing for us all to be thinking about. Is it's easy for us all to say, save the vaquita, stop fishing,
right.
get your nets out of the water, but it's much more difficult to actually solve that with meaningful solutions.
No, because
so that they can survive, the fishing communities can survive as well.
You cannot ask someone to give up their livelihood, because I've got this fabulous plan for getting the mules that draw the carriages in New Orleans, because I think that is so archaic and so of a bygone era and so unnecessary. I've got this fabulous plan to get them off the cobblestone streets. But I also have another plan to keep those carriage companies in business. So you cannot ask someone to stop what they're doing without giving them an alternative. I completely agree with that. But now it's made a little bit more enticing to drop nets and to fish in the Sea of Cortez, because that's also the home of the Totoaba. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Totoaba?
That's correct. You got it.
Yeah. And the moment I start thinking that China, the Asian countries, are possibly getting on the right road. I mean, just even, starting to put regulations in place for traffickers, for poachers and things like that. I hear about something like the Totoaba and their gas bladder, their swim bladder, and the fact that this is now prized as such a delicacy. And I think, no, still backwards, still archaic thinking, still wrong, southward moral compass pointing thinking, because this is why these gas bladders, this fish is the thing in the Sea of Cortez that the gillnets are being dropped for. This fish.
That is right. And we talked about alternative solutions, and that's important. But then why this problem has evolved is because it was a problem of unsustainable fishing practices. It evolved into a wildlife trafficking issue because this fish and its swim bladder is so attractive on the black market in China. Then now the organized criminals in Mexico and really far beyond have realized how much money they can make, and quite easily without much of a risk to themselves, because there's not a lot of people chasing these wildlife traffickers in general in the grand scheme of crime. And so it really has taken a chokehold on these communities, and they don't have alternative solutions right now. So it's an easy thing to just walk right into. And so, of course, that's not the decision we want these communities to be making. But in the face of seeing their livelihoods disappear, that it's very easy to draw them into this organized crime trap, and then they can't get out. And we've seen that, and you'll see it if you do see the Sea of Shadows film, which we'll talk about. I'm sure it is very well shown how these different folks get kind of entrapped in this web of corruption and crime, and they just can't get out.
No, and once you're in, you are in, because it's not just the Mexican criminal element. It's also the Chinese mafia, the Chinese criminal element, because one of these swim bladders goes for $10,000. Just one. Do we know what it is that the Chinese think that this is doing for them? The eating of this swim bladder.
Yeah, what we've heard and understood is that pregnant women can find some relief from their discomfort, and then there's also the typical good health, prosperity, all of those things. But there's absolutely no scientific evidence to show that it does anything.
There never is.
Yeah. And it's, it's one of the many products from animals that we all care very much about that are being trafficked to China and utilized for more traditional purposes or myths, really, medical myths, than they are for actual medical healing properties. So it's the same with rhino horn and elephant tusk and pangolin scales. So, I mean, the list goes on for all of the other animals and that are being unfortunately caught and killed for these products that are going to China. So that's a really big part of this issue.
I think there's a sense of shame and sort of an ignorance on the part of some Asian individuals, because I was speaking with a girl from China just last week, and she happened to be at a facility that I was at, and she's one of these genius, women who's studying, microbiomes or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I said, completely off topic, I said, what do you think about the Yulin Dog Meat Festival? And she says, oh, I don't know anything about that. And I said, well, yes, and here is what it is. And she says, oh, I don't think that happens. And I said, yeah, it does. It actually does. And she said, well, I know that in my province we treat our dogs with a tremendous amount of respect. And I thought, okay, so either you are not being truthful, or you don't know, or you are trying to cover up what is certainly an incredibly shameful practice, because this is the country that gave us Confucius, for heaven's sakes. This is the country that has given us so much Eastern wisdom, and then they do this. They have this backward, nonsensical, irrational love of things that do nothing for them and are decimating animals. And I don't know. I mean, I'm always baffled by that. So now we had 30 vaquita, now we've got 15. When was Sea of Shadows filmed? This is the documentary that was executive produced by Leonardo DiCaprio and directed by, let me just make sure I've got this.
I can help you with that. Richard Ledkani is his name.
Richard Ledkani. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And so when was this filmed?
It was filmed in 2017, and we were first introduced to Richard because of our rescue effort that was being planned for October of 2017. And Richard was actually involved already with Leonardo DiCaprio, because together they had made a film called The Ivory Game about the slaughter of elephants and then the illegal export of ivory and then trafficking it to China. So when we were looking for a documentary filmmaking company to help really document what was going on and the plight of the vaquita, Leonardo DiCaprio had already gotten involved in vaquita conservation in general, had been speaking with the Mexican president, who was then speaking with our direct point of contact in Mexico about our rescue effort. And so things just started to fall in place for Leonardo to be wanting to help with the film effort, and then wanting Richard in particular to make the film, because he really made an amazing film about elephants that actually was able to, we believe, influence government law or the actions of the Chinese government in outlawing the importation of ivory. So there was a lot of hope, I think, put in Richard, and he really delivered on this film.
So the rescue effort was then documented. This documentary is about this particular rescue effort in 2017, and everything that you had to contend with. Protests, from what I saw from the trailer, protests back and forth. You show this incredible consortium of like-minded and truly non-like-minded organizations. I mean, we have activists. We've got on one side that want all the tanks emptied. We've got scientists, conservationists. We've got local and regional governments involved, and this shows all of this, all to save the remaining, at that point, 30 of these small little porpoises and relocate them.
Right.
Where would you, if you were, if I haven't seen the film, so I really can't spoil the film, but so I guess I will ask, because there's so much drama, even just from what I've seen from the trailer, and I encourage everyone to go see Sea of Shadows. There was a lot of conflict, and you were put in potentially fatal situations.
Yes, there was a lot of conflict, and you're right. I mean, this film brought together people from all different aspects of conservation and the extreme ends of conservation, and that is what really was so inspiring about what happened, and watching people. It took having the situation get extremely dire, but when we got to that point, seeing people completely set their differences aside and say, you know what, we don't have time to argue. We all agree we want to save this animal, and we're going to help each other. And so I remember there was one meeting in particular we had in San Diego, and we were really talking about how to launch this effort. And we had people from all aspects that probably didn't think they would ever find it themselves in a room
together.
Yes. And asking each other well, what would you do? And how would you do? They were brainstorming together, and it was, I just saw the future of conservation in that moment. And it was just so invigorating. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is how we do this. And if we could just do more of that. And I apologize for the beautiful sun coming in.
Never apologize for the sun.
It's becoming a beautiful sunny San Diego day.
Yes.
Perfect actually timed with what I'm trying to share, which is that, it really, I hope other people in the room are having that same moment where they were realizing, why have we not been willing to talk to each other about all of these things? Because we all want the same thing, which is to save species.
That just made this show go from rather dire news to an incredibly hopeful experience, and thank you so much. Do you see this? Because I do want to find out exactly where you would relocate the vaquita, but we'll get to that in a moment. Do you see this truly as the future of conservation? Do you see these individuals who were in this room together from disparate organizations with disparate mindsets, taking this camaraderie and this, you know what, we don't have time to wait attitude back to their organizations and trying to disseminate that attitude, in their boardrooms, in their workspaces? Do you see that happening? Have you kept in touch with some of these people saying, look, spread the word?
Yes, very much so. And I see it. I don't think it's necessarily the same exact people. I think it's a blueprint for how we can get this done. And, there are so many other species we could start talking about that are approaching this point. And I actually am seeing it. So we had a workshop in Germany last December where we got folks together that were from all different aspects of marine mammal conservation and all different perspectives, and got together and said, hey, we can't let this happen again, what happened with vaquita. And part of the reason we're in the position we are with vaquita is because it didn't happen sooner. So let's not have that happen again. Let's start talking right now today. How are we going to collaborate on these issues? And what's everybody going to bring to the table? And it was an amazing workshop. And so I again was encouraged by what, and at the beginning of the workshop, there was trepidation, and you could see folks like, okay, there had to be
daggers
trust
hidden.
Was developed. There had to be trust and reimagining what it can look like, and that it doesn't necessarily look like what it could have looked like 50 years ago. It looks like what we're all envisioning it to look like today. So I think we're on the right track, and
Good.
I just hope more people join and really get behind that kind of approach, because it can be scary to do, but look what you can do if you actually join forces.
Well, if you actually open your mind up to a different perspective, which is, which is so incredibly important and so not done. So you used the word happened to the vaquita. You used the past tense.
Yeah.
So I am going to assume from that Now, the rescue effort that was documented by Sea of Shadows took place in 2017. It's 2019. We've lost half of them. Do you think that this species is now a lost cause?
No, I don't. And, I know that some people really do. There's two reasons why I don't. Maybe there's a million reasons why I don't, but there's two really important reasons why I don't yet think it's a lost cause. One is because of the really amazing genetic work that the Southwest Fisheries Science Center has done. And they are telling us from everything they've learned from vaquitas that have been recovered, that they have been a small population for a long time. They have already gone through the pressure that a small population places on an individual or a population level DNA profile. And so the genetic strength is there for them. They've already purged out the, let's just say, bad genes or whatever you want to phrase that. And they now have a lot of genetic strength. So, and we know because we see them right now in the wild, they're still having babies. So we know, and they look good, their body condition is good. And so everything else we know, there are no other threats to their lives right now except for nets. So we just have to get the nets out. So that is one thing that really encourages me. And then the movement that I'm seeing this film create and the passion, it needs to spread. Right now, it's very much in the US as we travel with the film, and people start to open their eyes to like, wait a minute, I have a voice here, I can actually help. And we are, generating some really forward motion on what, and pressure to put on not just the Mexican government, but the US government, the Chinese government, that together they can hear our voices. We want to save these animals. We have to provide solutions for the fishermen. So I don't know. It just feels like there's a really positive wave of emotion and passion and goodwill that we actually have a shot, but we don't have much time.
We don't.
Every minute matters.
Right.
So
right now,
that get involved, the better.
Right. I want to talk to you about a little bit more about this passionate drive, and I want to talk to you about specifically in a moment what that will look like, because it is truly, it's one thing to say we need more forward motion, we need more voices raised, but I want, especially for my listeners, to get into the nuts and bolts of how they do that, who they write to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to talk about that in a moment. But let's go back to the gene pools of the vaquita, or the gene pool. We were able to recover, because what we talked about the vaquita on the last show that we did, and what I think is probably pointed out in the movie, is how elusive this little dolphin is, because it's not in clear waters, it's in murky waters, all the sediment and the nutrients from, I believe it's the Colorado River, right? That flows into the Sea of Cortez, yes. And it stirs up. So we are able to, they use echolocation, and we are able, with these pods, so we are able to locate them. I want to talk about the pods in a minute. So we know how many there are, roughly, but have we recovered any vaquita? We must have.
In terms of
bodies. In terms of bodies. So we are talking about vaquita that have been caught and passed, caught in gill nets and passed, and so it is from that you necropsy.
Necropsy. That's correct. So yeah, for years, any animals that are either drowned in gill nets and then wash up on the shore, they're recovered, not all the time, but some of the times they're recovered. And then there's an organization called Profepa. They're kind of like the EPA, but they're actually an enforcement agency as well. They will recover those bodies and then get them to the proper people. And so those have been necropsied over the years, and then tissues have been sampled and taken right here to San Diego, to the Southwest Fisheries Science Center. So that's one way. And now Sea Shepherd, when they recover a vaquita in their net, they've always been dead, but they will also help get those bodies to the right place, which eventually comes across the Mexico-U.S. border and gets to the Science Center.
These pods that are able, what are they called?
They're called C-pods.
C-pods,
which are acoustic listening devices that are deployed in a grid pattern in the Sea of Cortez, focused where we believe vaquitas live.
Now, what's interesting about the C-pods is that you're obviously able to locate them, discover how many of them there are. But these C-pods have also been purloined, is the nice word. They've been stolen by the criminal element.
That's
and
right.
how have they been using them? Why have they been using them? What benefit is that to them?
There really is none, except to just foil the plans of the scientists. And the reason really to do that is because the C-pods help us document and track where the animals are.
And where the gill nets are.
Where the animals are. So the C-pods are detecting the animals, the vaquitas.
Right.
And yes. And so if they disappear, the evidence that they still exist disappears. And so they start to, it's a lot easier for them to say, well, the vaquita already went extinct.
I understand. Okay. I was thinking, well, of course, you cannot echolocate something that is caught in a gill net if it is already perished, obviously.
That's correct. So it's only the live animals that they are detecting.
Right. Where would you transport if this rescue effort had gone off as planned, or if another rescue effort is put in place and it goes off as planned? Where will you transport the animals? Because they need a specific environment.
That's right. So we had built a very large sea pen that was based on the technology and the knowledge that has been gained for years of housing different types of animals in sea pen environments. And we had been collaborating with Fjord and Belt, which has a facility in the Netherlands where they have harbor porpoises in a sea pen environment. So we had already built this 40-meter variable depth sea pen to be the starting point. So that would be the first stop. Can the animals actually tolerate being in the care of humans in this kind of enclosure? And that was actually built and anchored right next to the coastline in San Felipe. If they had been successfully acclimated into that environment, then we already had people in place to then build a very large sanctuary, that a sea pen facility where the animals could be cared for, could live and breed, and then be eventually reintroduced back into the Sea of Cortez without ever leaving the local area. And we talked about all options. We walked through where's the best place for them to be, and the best place for them to be is close to their natural environment. So we didn't want to stray too far away. And we also knew how important it was to the community. And they were telling us that. They were telling us, don't take the vaquita away somewhere far away from San Felipe, where we identify with the animal. Leave it here and let us be part of the solution. So that was really part of the big picture plan.
Is there another rescue effort planned for these remaining 15?
No, there isn't right now. And, it was so, when the decision was made, because there were two animals that were captured for this rescue effort. The first one was a younger animal, and she was in our care for about 4 hours, and she never settled down. She was just kind of that typical young cetacean outward stress level, and we couldn't calm her to the point where we felt comfortable moving forward. So we released her and completely regrouped, and we had to ask questions. Is it because she's young, or is it because she's a vaquita? And so, when we were running some of the reevaluating and analyzing some of the data that we had collected while she was in our care, and at the end of that, we said, well, we don't know. We can't determine it from the time that we spent with her. So we're going to try again. But we kind of changed our criteria and said, we're not going to bring in a young animal unless we have more than one. And then the second animal was an old female. She was at least 15 years old, but that's as far as they could get with the aging techniques. So she could have been older, which is old for a porpoise. And You know, she looked great until she didn't. And so we ended up having to do an emergency release with her. So she was looking like she was showing positive signs of acclimation until she wasn't. So at that point, then again, you're stuck with the question, is it because they're vaquitas, or was this an individual animal issue? But you gotta just, with so few animals, you have to assume it's because they're vaquitas. So there was a lot, you know, we got a lot of really wonderful feedback from all around the community. Some people saying, please don't leave, you have to keep trying, they're going to drown. To others saying, you know, we tried and we cannot continue to go forward because there's just, you know, because of what those first two animals revealed to us. So it's a really heartbreaking situation. And I think an important lesson for us all to learn is you can't wait until there are 30 to start trying something like this. You have to determine if XE2 conservation, which is basically removing animals from a dangerous situation, if that's an option when there's thousands, so that you have time to get to know the animals in more of a stepwise fashion, and with the stakes just not being so insanely high.
So high. Well, as you,
Carolyn.
Yeah, go ahead, Gray.
Well, you know, Karen and I got a chance to see the film yesterday, and what Cynthia just described is shown in real time in the film, in parts of it. Much of the film, I should say, is about the law enforcement aspect, the undercover reporting, the undercover investigations that take place in this region to try to track down where this market is coming from, who's behind it, who's benefiting, who's not, and what impact it has on the community. And then interspliced throughout the film is the story of the Vaquita CPR and Cynthia's efforts leading those scientists and animal care managers and so forth. But what you and I have talked about in the past with Dr. Barb Taylor at NOAA Fisheries and other people, you know, I knew what to expect, but to see it in real time in the film, it's a gut punch. And you could tell that it was devastating to everyone who was there, because it did start with a rather promising result with this female. And then it, as Cynthia just said, she was doing fine until she wasn't. And there's one point in the film where Cynthia is quoted, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically there was a lot of pressure not to do this on all sides because of the risks involved. And she said, you know, we may lose them if they're in our care, but we're going to definitely lose them if they stay in the ocean. And I'm butchering her quote, but there was never the guarantee that this was going to work. And yet these folks, including Cynthia, staked their reputation, their
lives, possibly.
This project, yeah,
their lives, because you know the Chinese mafia criminal element, the Mexican criminal element. These are they don't play around.
I guess my question for you, Cynthia, is you know, we're all biologists, behaviorists, zoo managers, and so forth, and we talk about conservation as if the problem is just not taking in one more acre of land and turning it into farmland or whatever. But really what I think this film shows is that we have to really involve law enforcement in a way that I don't think most conservationists have thought a lot about until very, very recently. And that is, we can do all the science and everything as correctly as possible, but when you have millions of dollars of illegal trafficking going on, it really tips the scale. I mean, it's a thumb on the scale, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, you know, when we started talking about this, it did evolve from an unsustainable fishing issue that, you know, the vaquita was caught in the middle of, to a wildlife trafficking, extremely dangerous, organized crime problem. And you know, the authorities are involved, but there, in my opinion, isn't enough yet. There aren't enough resources pointed at that, because the issues, we're still trying to understand them and how much of an impact they're having on endangered species. So there is another storyline that's captured in the film, which is of Andrea Costa, who is with Earth League International. And this man is truly remarkable. He has hired a big team of former FBI and CIA operatives. And they now, a lot of them, you know, were getting close to the end of their career and said, you know what, I'd rather turn my efforts toward saving species, which is fabulous. So they operate in the same way. They're intelligence operatives, and they're gathering data, and they currently only accept money from nonprofits, so not from governments. They don't want to be seen as biased by any specific government agencies. And then they create these intelligence dossiers and then provide them to different international governments. And then, things happen. We don't know for sure if it's due to the intelligence they've gathered, but after they turned over dossiers that had to do with Tetwaba trafficking to the Chinese, US, and Mexican governments, the biggest Tetwaba bust ever was made in China just a few weeks later. And so that's important. And so it's going to take, yes, law enforcement agencies, international wildlife trafficking agencies, and then it's going to take people like Andrea and his team who are, willing to take risks and do the work and help out these government agencies, because they're doing it for the animals, and that's their pure motivation, is to save species.
Right. Let's talk about demand. How do we, and I think this is the question. How do we decrease demand for a Tetwaba swim bladder?
Yeah.
Because if there's no demand, there's no reason to gill net fish this particular animal. Is it even possible? It's also like saying, how do we decrease demand for tortured dog meat? How do we decrease demand for ivory, tiger penis, pangolin scale? Is there any forward motion that you or Gray see toward the next generation becoming more aware and saying, you know what, this doesn't help. This doesn't help me in any way.
Yeah, I have, I think, two examples. One is, the one way is to do it with these law enforcement and nonprofits that are working on breaking up that supply chain. So, their intelligence is pointed at breaking the supply chain up, but you're talking about then the demand.
Exactly, because
that comes to educating these different communities, cultures, countries about the impact that it's having, because they may be disconnected from the fact that their tradition is actually decimating entire species. And so when the director and I were in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong Film Festival, and we did a Q&A with a group of people that had come to see the film, and they were shocked, they were embarrassed, they were emotional. It was a really eye-opening experience to see how they were so disconnected from it and just unaware. And they, just couldn't. After the Q&A ended, they stayed. They wanted to talk about it. They wanted to understand how they could educate their friends. And this was a small group of people because it was a film festival screening, but it opened my eyes to the power of film.
Tremendous.
And that's a conservation tool that we haven't really been, at least I hadn't been, I shouldn't say, a lot of people have been thinking about it. I hadn't been thinking about utilizing in this way to get these messages to places that are hard to reach.
It's mass communication, absolutely mass communication.
That's right.
And I can imagine that must have been so gratifying for you, even though it was on a small scale, a small group. How incredibly gratifying. All right, so let's talk about passion, because in your podcast, Gray, Dr. Smith, you use the phrase snapping people out of this of their disconnect, or this torpor that they are in. And Leonardo DiCaprio, God bless him for getting behind this, executive producer, that's the money guy. So for throwing some money, because I know. So for him truly getting behind this and getting behind saving the vaquita. And so this could be a great conservation tool. But
Absolutely.
in addition to opening people's eyes with this film, when the eyes are open, what's the action that needs to be taken? Because we can snap people out of it, but then if we give them nothing to do, do they write to their congressman? Do they say, hey, I want more laws that give more funds to law enforcement?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do?
Yeah. So there's, specific things to do for vaquitas. You know, the list is long, but if we talk about specifically right now for the situation, there's a couple different things. There's petitions at change.org. One of them was initiated by National Geographic's on the Sea of Shadows platform. And so people can visit seaofshadows.film and read that petition and decide if it's something they want to sign. There's other change.org petitions specifically on vaquita. So that's about getting your voice heard and making sure that if you want to help amplify the message that is being given to different agencies, that's a way to do it. But then there's also just choices that we're making. You know, if we really zoom all the way out and look at big picture, you know, how are we spending our time during the day? And are we actually helping solve these issues with what we're deciding to do and how we're spending our time? And especially, you know, I don't want to discount how much we can change with my generation and the generation surrounding it. But man, these early generations where these current, you know, these young people that I've been interfacing with, this is so obvious to them. And so I'm hoping, in terms of saving species, I'm hoping that a lot of folks are now looking at what can I do for a living that actually helps these issues, and how can I use my intelligence and my passion to solve these problems, like alternative fishing and wildlife trafficking and social impact and educating global communities. I mean, so many ways that people can take what they're good at and apply it to these big picture problems.
Well, as Gray will tell you, I personally certainly hope they go about it the right way, the rational way, the way that actually solves problems and does not create more, because that's certainly what we don't need. Right. Thank you so much. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. Gray, last thoughts?
Well, I want to say thank you to Cynthia and her team and all the people involved in really trying to bravely do something that hadn't been done, which was to take in a vaquita, and to just echo what she said, that we've got to be willing to act and intervene much sooner with wild populations than we have. And lastly, as this film points out, it's about the economics. And until such time as we can change the economics so that wild species are worth more alive than dead, we're going to continue to see this kind of problem worldwide with other species.
Hear, hear. Brilliant thought. Brilliant. Andrea, thoughts?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for doing the right thing and just giving us insight into this beautiful creature and putting your livelihood, your life on the line to rescue, you know, and be a steward of this planet. So thank you. As
Gray knows, I've seen enough animal cruelty videos, abuse videos, that I don't ever need to see another one. And obviously, Sea of Shadows does not fall into that, but it is a gut punch because, as Gray knows, I have been punched in the gut a lot. I don't ever need to see anything else. But I cannot wait to see Sea of Shadows because, yes, it will be a gut punch, but hopefully it's a worldwide gut punch that I hope everyone goes to see. And so thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia Smith, for continuing your work. Everyone go see Sea of Shadows and NMMF.org, which stands for National Marine Mammal Foundation.org. Go donate, look at what they're doing, see how you can help. VaquitaCPR.org. That is her baby. That is Dr. Smith's baby. So go there, see again how you can donate, see what they are doing, see how you can help, and then seaofshadows.film, I believe. And then is there anything else that I've missed?
Gosh, no, I think it's just at both seaofshadows.film and vaquitacpr.org. Yep. We try to paint the picture of all the different organizations involved. So there's a lot of different ways to help support these issues, and you can decide which one resonates most with you and how do you want to help. Well,
our diversity brethren, sometimes we don't agree with them a lot, but on this we do agree, and we have to, if we're intellectually honest, we have to say thank you for everything that even those we do not always agree with do. Most importantly, thank you Dr. Smith, for coming on the show. Will you come on again and give us
would love
updates?
to.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah. Maybe we'll pick a cheerier topic, or maybe just as important, something else. The next species. Yeah.
We'll talk about the one that we cannot wait. The next species we cannot wait to get to know. We need to get to know them right now, and we need to start saving them right now. So that's what we will do. That's what we will do.
Awesome. We got a list.
Yes. Okay, good. Listen, don't say it, because you're coming back on.
All right.
Okay.
Will do.
Once again, listeners, you have been listening to Animal Magnetism. I am your preservationist and conservationist host, Carolyn Hennessy. I am been honored to have been joined today by Dr. Cynthia Smith, whose bio I didn't even read because I would just be getting to the end of it now. That's how long it is. So she's look her up. She is worth the read. Dr. Gray Stafford, one of my besties. Thank you so much. Your presence in my life means everything.
Oh.
Andrew, I know. What's that about? What's this? Well, it's not an Animal Magnetism show unless Carolyn cries just once.
That is true.
I know. All right, Andrea, I love you. I adore you. Thank you so much for being there. Now you need to get back here, and also for being you, just for everything you do. Thank you once again to SeaWorld and SeaWorld Rescue. We love them. They do so much for this planet. It makes my head spin. And we have a huge love letter to SeaWorld coming up. I think about 9 episodes, releasing sea lions, intake, assisting with operations, caring for this and that, learning so much, going out on a rescue operation. So we stay tuned for that. And Nutrient Touch. NutrientTouch.com, I believe, is it. But just look up Nutrient Touch for animals. Reducing joint pain, increasing mobility, lowering stress. Great for older dogs. All right, we've come to the end of a fantastic show. I think this one should be submitted for the Emmys, don't you, Tony? Tony Sweet, the handsomest man in radio, who you never get to see, except on his shows. What are your shows?
Hi, Tony.
Tony's show is Friday at 4. What's it called? Truth Be Told. All right.
Awesome.
Check into that. We will see you in 2 weeks, but remember, in everything you do, attempt to cultivate the preservationist heart. It will stand you in good stead. See you later. Thanks. Bye.